So you're standing at the grocery store and you're waiting to just check out. But while you're waiting, you can see on the register shelves that there are dozens of different chocolate bars. And as we may have tried a few of them, we don't always necessarily know where they come from or how they are made. And as consumers, it is very important for us to know where our food is made and how it's processed. So today, I'll be talking about how chocolate is made. So first, I'll begin by talking about how the cocoa beans are actually turned into these nibs, which I will explain later. And then I will talk about how these nibs are turned into this liquid mixture. And lastly, I'll talk about how the liquid mixture and what happens after. All right, so I'll begin by talking about the chocolate beans. So as you can see on the left, we have this chocolate pod, which are grown on trees, and what is inside are just the seeds of the tree. And the seeds are what we know as cocoa beans. So cocoa trees and the farming industry mainly happens along the equator because that's where the weather is most forgiving. And it also most is, as far as the region goes, it's mostly grown in West Africa. According to Masa Shabare, who is a leading researcher for Statista, the biggest cocoa supplier country in the world is the Ivory Coast, with in 2020 having made $3.6 billion. So as you can see, the chocolate industry is very big, and that's just in the Ivory Coast. So once the cocoa beans arrive at the factory, at any given factory, they're first filtered. As you can see, we got these like metal filters at the bottom. And the reason why they filter is to avoid any sticks or rocks or anything that is not a cocoa bean for it to be processed. Upon filtering, with through a conveyor belt, they are pushed this micronizing machine. And although this machine looks very complicated and big and scary, it's actually very simple. All it does, that cylinder rotates at high temperatures. And the reason to that is so that the nibs, which is what is inside of that cocoa bean, is for it to detach itself from the shell so that it can then be put in this winnower machine. And this machine, it has these like rakes that will pretty much break and scrape away any of the shells, and it also has a vacuum, so it will suck all the shells away. So what we have on the right is finally the nibs, which is what is the most important ingredient in all of chocolate making. So now that I've talked about how cocoa beans are turned into these nibs, I'll talk about how these nibs are turned into a liquid mixture. So the nibs are actually roasted and then they get grinded at high temperatures. And these high temperatures cause it to turn into what is known as chocolate liquor. And chocolate liquor doesn't have any alcohol. It's just a term for liquid nibs, essentially. And it's very liquidy because of the high amount of fat. According to the Simon Fraser University, nibs are highly fatty, sometimes up to 50% fat. So this is why it turns into liquid when it's at high temperatures. And this liquid is called the cocoa butter, which is basically the fat of the chocolate liquor. So this cocoa butter can also be extracted and used for different kinds of chocolates and just to mess with like different consistencies. That's where like the art of chocolate making comes. So as you can see, we have these different recipes. I made this diagram. Dark chocolate only requires chocolate liquor and sugar. And then milk chocolate is made from the chocolate liquor, sugar, and milk powder. And lastly, we have white chocolate, which is made from not chocolate liquor. It's made from only the cocoa butter, sugar, and the milk powder. So you can see that even though there's only 4 different ingredients, you can have 3 different kinds of chocolates. So now, when you mix all the ingredients, you get very large particles, which is not what so that leads to having, as you can see on the left, it has this like cake batter kind of consistency to it. So in order for it to not be like that, they had to go through a refining process. And in the refining process, it uses different machines depending on the factory. But I've seen a couple that have these like rollers that will roll the batter multiple times until the particles are so small that they will actually turn into this powder that we see on the right. The powder we see on the right is this really small particles and well mixed. But obviously we don't eat the chocolate in that powder form. We eat it in a bar form. So in order to get it to a bar form, it needs to be molded. But before we mold it, we have to reliquidify the chocolate. So it gets reliquidified in order to be molded. So it gets taken to this molding station. And in this molding station, we can see that it has these like droplets on the bottom. So we'll drop chocolate on this conveyor belt that will move away, and it just keeps repeating that process. And from this point on, it just goes to a cooling room in which the chocolate will be hardened. In that case, we can see it's chocolate chips. So just take the hard shape of the chocolate chips, which we know, which eventually just get packaged and shipped. And yeah, that's how chocolate is made. Thank you.